of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. Let me remind anyone who will address the board to be sure and sign in on the clipboard that's on the table in front of me. Make sure the microphones are turned on and speak clearly into them. Let's see, we've certainly got a quorum. Everybody here is a full member, so there's no point in appointing anyone to stand in. Is that it?
No.
And with that, let me offer the reminder that our next meeting after tonight is October 15th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in this room. Let me then move on our agenda to our Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Robert, is there anything to report?
Yes, in response to the board's request that we provide information at every meeting on the admin approvals that we've issued since the new site plan regulations came into effect, thought I would give you a quick report tonight for what we've done year to date, and then start going forward from how many we've done from meeting to meeting. So year to date, we've issued 31 administrative approvals, 12 have been tenant changeouts, we've done 3 home occupations, 9 little minor site revisions, and 7 ADUs.
Thank you for the update. Does anyone have any questions about those?
The only thing I noticed is we had a bit of a blitz on people having these awful banner things. One of the filling station near Burger King has now got 6 again. It's got wine, beer, cigars, ATM, CBD, which I know is this new ointment, and there's another one and I can't remember it. Shall I come and fill out a form and you can send them a nasty letter, or will you?
So the last time we did this, they actually ignored the letter. It's also difficult with temporary signs the way the ordinance is written because they don't require a permit.
Okay.
So we've got a zoning amendment ready to go to come forward in the future that would require permits for temporary signs, so I actually have some sort of teeth to go after these.
But
the other advantage on that particular site is they are working on a site plan application, so you can let them have it when they come in.
That's what I thought. I was going to bring that up. Are they not? So I think we should tell them that if they want to have their application even considered, they better get rid of some of those bloody signs. However, perhaps I shouldn't say that.
I'm not quite ready to phrase it in that way, but someone should point out to them that they be in better standing with us when they do appear if that isn't something that we have to talk about.
Yep.
If that isn't something we have to talk about. Interesting to see the zoning amendments when those come forward. I know it's always challenging to figure out the right approach to temporary signs, so I'll be interested to see what it is that you guys have come up with as a proposal. See if that. Any other reports, Robert? I think you have one more at least. You got a new member in your department.
Yeah. I thought that was mentioned last time, but yes, I'll go through it again. Our new assistant planner, Casey Wolf, has officially started yesterday, and we didn't make her go to this meeting, but she will be on board for the October 15th meeting.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. Any questions by members of the board for the staff? Seeing none, then let's take up item 3 on our agenda, which is Alana Ferretti as the applicant and 4JT LLC as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of a waiver of full site plan review for the relocation of a daycare playground resulting in the elimination of 6 required parking spaces. The parcel's located at 4 John Tyler Street in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 2D, lot 41-10. It's case number Planning Board 2019-31. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
It is my understanding that the applicant's got some new information or a new proposal that they'd like to kind of talk to the board about, so I would defer to them to address the board with what they're looking to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Please come forward.
You guys have a full house tonight.
Yeah, it's packed. Wait till the public hearing starts and all these people want to talk.
I like your Bank of Dad. That's a very good shirt, sir.
Thank you.
I'd love to know where you got it.
I'll be honest with you. I think
2003.
I loaned my
That's where you
kids
got
money
it.
and they bought it for me.
Well, I could do with one for my
It's
grandkids.
0 interest and it's non-paybackable.
Oh, I know
So
that.
I'm not sure it's a really good
I think
business
we all
model.
know that one.
That's pretty funny. So once you've had a chance to settle in and sign in, introduce yourself first and then take off with your project.
Here, you introduce yourself first. Huh?
Hi, I'm Alana Ferretti. I am the owner of the Nest Infant and Toddler Development Center that we're in the process of renovating right now at 4 John Tyler Street.
And I'm David Ferretti, Bank of Dad, and I'm moral support and kind of number guy with her. So
Excellent. Go ahead. Tell us what's about your daycare.
All right. So my child care center is, we always make jokes, we don't call it daycare because it's derogatory.
All right. Consider me warned.
Thank you. We're in the process right now of making the renovations to what was currently a child care facility prior to us taking over that facility. There is a play area out there on site now, in I guess common grounds is what it would be considered. But what I was looking to do is with the renovations, as licensing regulations have changed in the past couple of years, would be to relocate the playground from where it is now to directly in front of our units F and G at 4 John Tyler. And then doing this, it would expand the size of the playground that we have available for the children, as well as be less of a safety concern, as it's an infant and toddler development center, so our little guys would have to cross through the parking lot to get to the play area.
As it
Excellent.
currently exists.
Yeah.
What she's proposing is basically allowing the front doors and the access doors for the children to be able to go right into the playground. And that serves a second purpose. If by some chance they get out on their own, they are contained within another area. So from a safety standpoint, it's more expensive to move it than it is to just expand our current one. But if she has to expand the current one, that I think was the backup plan that you were referring to earlier.
Oh, okay. So what you'd like to do is what's on the plan that we have, and then what Robert was mentioning was potentially an alternative if this isn't appropriate or acceptable.
Right.
Yes.
Is that where we're at?
Yep.
Okay. So did you get a chance to review the memo that the staff wrote when they looked at your plan?
Yes.
A couple of days ago, they sent it out.
Yep.
Do you have any comments on some of the things that are in there? Or do you want me to kind of walk you through some of the ones that were on my mind, or what's
So-
the best approach?
I think that from our discussion prior to this meeting, a couple of the things that I noticed were there was a lot of wording that was geared towards ADA compliance. But after going back and looking at the parking lot as is, it's not in ADA compliance right now because there's only 2 handicap spaces.
True.
And then I think another piece of it was the crosswalk being in the wrong area. So I'd be happy to make any of those changes. And I can add either language or somehow draft where the other handicap location is as it currently stands. But
Okay.
working with the plans we had available, it didn't necessarily line up with how the parking lot is currently set up.
I think that's true, that several of the comments were related to the idea that the plan you're working from isn't the same as what actually got built out there. There's a little bit of minor variations that come and go. So let's deal with the parking first. 2 questions with the parking. One is this question of ADA accessible parking, and I have no doubt that you're correct that there are 2 ADA spaces today, and one of them will be removed as a result of putting the parking lot in the area where it is. At least that's my understanding. The other is that when you undergo some renovations like this or site plans, you put yourself in a position where you're required to come into compliance even if you've been grandfathered before. So the result is that for any site plan that we would look at, whether it's moving the playground or making it bigger, there's got to be 4 handicap accessible, ADA accessible parking spaces that are located as appropriate according to the ADA, which is sort of close to entrances. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on one side of the building or the other, because there's entrances on both sides of this building. There actually should be some ADA spaces on both sides. But one way or another, there would need to be 4 spaces that are designated as ADA van accessible spaces. When you do that, and it's more than just a matter of saying it'll be that one and that one and that one and that one, they take up the space next to them because of the space for the wheelchair ramp and all of that. So you actually lose a couple of spaces when you add ADA spaces because they take up essentially 2 for 1. Then, so we would need a plan that shows where those are going to be and where that would be painted and all of that. And then obviously once that's approved, there would be a requirement that somebody actually go out there on the ground and make them painted that way and marked off. The other question about parking is determining a sense of how many are needed on the site in total for all the uses, given that your playground will occupy about half a dozen of them that are existing there today and take them away. I've been out there a few times. I think you're in the same area as the paper graphics, the printer.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
They
the
don't
same
need
building.
anything like the amount of parking that's out there. You got tons of it. But somehow we need to have some number and say there's going to be, 51 or 32 or whatever the number is, and then we can consider that and decide whether that seems sufficient for the use. But we have to start with at least some sense of how many are there.
Okay.
If we don't know how many there are or how many there will be when you're done, then we don't have the ability to make a decision about whether that's enough.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. I think,
But I think we actually have kind of numbers on that.
to
good.
touch on it, I've already spoken with the other tenants or the property owners over there now. So the property owner of Paper Graphics as well as Soma, as they both own their units, who are in agreement to the playground plans and losing those play spaces to relocate our play area. In the next 2 years, I'm going to own 42% of that building. So there's the 2 units that are mentioned. I'm in the process of purchasing another 2 that are located over there.
Okay.
With that, based on numbers, and then I know that I believe it's a town requirement for childcare. We need 1 space per every 8 children that we have enrolled with us.
Does that sound right, Robert? I think that is right. But
Yeah, I don't know what the state requirement is, but the parking calculation for the town is the total of 18 based on the enrollment that she's proposing right now.
okay. So, I'm sorry, I interrupted you a little bit. Let me let you finish your thought.
So I think with that, we kind of did the math out as being 42% of the building, what that number looked like between the 82 spaces. I think we took into consideration the 6 that would be removed that we'd be using for the play area,
Yep.
and that left us with,
The way it works out is if you take just on square footage of the building, that's what her percentage will ultimately be. If you take 42% roughly of the 82 spaces that are currently there, minus 6, comes out to about 37. That would be just be for her use if it were, again, 1-to-1 ratio for square footage to the parking requirements.
Yep.
Which it's not, and I'll get into that in a second. But ultimately, you take 10 spots off of that 37 for employees, and then you go for the 1-to-1 or the 8-to-1 ratio for how many people she has. That's another 7 spots. So it brings it down to a surplus of about 20 spots for her when it all comes down, said and done. But 2 things need to be mentioned. First of all, Alpha Graphics down in the
Paper
front
Graphics.
I'm sorry.
Paper Graphics.
Paper Graphics, sorry. Down in the front of the building basically has 7 employees, and they're in operation that has somebody with a specific tent in mind. They're either dropping something off, they're picking it up. So they're not going to use, a tiny fraction of those overall spots. If you're looking at, was it Sona?
Soma.
The Somer has, I think, 3 or 4 employees, and it's a 1-to-1 at most, so they'd take up 8 spots, all things considered. And they're really the only other people that are of any.
Movement mortgage.
I mean, you have
That
movement
would be the
mortgage,
same thing,
but
maybe another 3
again,
or 4.
they'd be taking over. We looked at the overall number with the 42%. They'd be taking over what they have right now, and they really don't have more than 5 or 6 cars in that parking lot, and I think that's the most I've ever seen there. And
That's not taking into consideration that I'll own that unit within the next couple of
Yeah.
years, so they're not going to be there anyway.
yeah, but right now is what you got to deal with.
So I think we can probably arrive at a number in maybe a little bit of an easier way. So one of the things that's challenging for us when you talk about future ownership is we hope that happens and you hope that it happens, but there's no guarantee that it happens. So it's hard for us to take that into account. But I think that we can get to the number that we want to by talking our way through this. I think you mentioned there's 82 spaces on the property now.
I think
as
that's what it
sits.
comes out to be, yep.
Yep.
Before we move any playgrounds around, there's 82 spaces, including 2 ADA spaces.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
So your playground is going to take away how many spaces?
Total of
It's going to be, it was 8 that was written,
8.
but the crosswalk and,
The
I mean, it's
plan,
a give and take because now we're going to have to add the ADA spaces.
Well,
Nope,
yeah,
let's
but
just
So
do the
8.
playground first. Just
8.
the playground
So it's 8.
is going to take away 8. So 8 from 82 leaves you 74. And then you've got to establish then 3 additional ADA spaces because there's one here that isn't going to be disturbed. You'll have to establish 3 additional ones out of the 74 that are there. That will essentially take away 3 more of your spaces because an existing space plus the one next to it is what it takes to
But
make
you
an
have to add
ADA.
in the fact that if the playground is now adjacent to the facility, then you don't need the crosswalk to bring the kids across the way. So that's basically the width of a car going all the way across.
Yep.
So there's two more that come back.
Bob,
Yes.
Or,
just a clarification. I believe they're required to have 4 handicap spaces, ADA spaces. But I
Only
believe
one of
only
them has to
one
be
of them
van. Yep.
has to be.
A van space.
accessible.
I didn't want
I think that's a good point.
that's right.
Very good.
Even if we were being conservative, though, and saying without necessarily the crosswalk gaining you back some spaces, and even assuming that you made all 4 of your ADA spaces van accessible,
Yep.
that's still giving you 71 spaces on this site.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see any problem with 71 spaces on this site. And
No, it's
so even without kind of going any further in the calculations than that, you'll always have at least based on what you've told us so far, 71 spaces. Now, the question is, where would the handicap accessible spaces be? And I think that if we end up with a definitive number, Robert and the staff can sort out where those spaces could be without us.
The plan doesn't, according to Robert, who just relayed a message to me, it's not reflected on the plan, but there is an ADA parking space in front of Ms. Ferretti's unit,
Right. So
Underneath the,
underneath the crosshatch.
underneath the cross.
Right.
So it's actually 7, not 8 that's being removed, and this is why it's important to get that math exactly right if the planning board is setting an exact number of spaces that's being reduced overall.
so a space that's underneath the playground is an ADA, or?
Correct.
Okay. So, but I think that's what we were already thinking about. One of the ones that going away was an ADA space.
Right, but she said the total calculation was 8 being removed because it's ADA van accessible, that actually only be 7.
Okay. So 7 removed would be 75, and then even if you made 3 more spaces, you're still
Right.
talking 72 instead of 71.
You're still fine.
The
Semantics, but I gotta get the math.
if we're all right and if we're all in agreement, and my planning board members think that this logic makes some sense, the questions for you would be that you could resolve with staff is where are these ADA spaces going to end up being and how are they going to be configured? The other is this is a commercial condominium, and it appears in it that these spaces are assigned to units, specific spaces are assigned to specific units. And you may be disturbing that assignment. I have no idea what your condo documents say or how these are laid out. I'm just looking at the plan where there's numbers that certain spaces are assigned to unit 3 and certain to 2 and 1 and all of that. And you may have to figure out some amendment to your condo documents that could be reviewed by our town legal counsel to make sure that the spaces, frankly, we don't care how you allocate them, but just so that what's on the
Yep.
ground and the documents match.
Okay.
It's the only thing that we would care about. Other than that, I think that would resolve the parking questions. Is that correct, Robert? The only other item that was on my mind was identifying that underneath the dumpster, where you will end up putting it, is that you put pavement underneath that, and it's not put on grass or dirt. Other than that, I think that tackles the things that I had on my mind to talk about that within the staff's memo. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I mean, I think what we're really saying, Mr. Chairman, is once they've agreed with the staff how they're going to lay it out, it's got to be laid out, because if you go up there, it's very difficult to see where anything's parked, and there are very few lines, or very obvious at the back. The front is much better lined, but the back is not, the lines have almost disappeared. I
Yeah.
mean, I did struggle
Yeah, you'll
to
have
even
to strike.
find what
Yep.
was there.
Yep.
So I think if you can agree the numbers and with Robert and the team, and you then get somebody just to paint the lines and particularly to paint the ADA spaces, I would have thought we were there.
I think that makes sense. Neil?
Yeah, I'd just like to say is I did go by there and take a look, and I think it'll be a huge improvement if you do the play area where you propose,
Yeah.
because what's there now looks
It's a nice.
really pathetic, yeah.
Thank you, Neil. You're my new best friend.
This will probably come up a little bit later too, but I was just curious about if you do put the play area there, you're at the end of the parking lot rather than off the parking lot. Is there any way to protect that area from traffic or cars going, or
We'll
accidents happen? But I
We'll
don't-
end up
is-
putting some sort of curbing at that point in time, and that's, I mean,
So
didn't know-
I'm currently the owner of the children's greenhouse. It's a similar setup. The way that our play area runs right now in our parking lot it literally is abutting those, the parking spaces. There's just some granite curbing, and we've obviously given a little bit of wiggle room for our fencing.
Yeah.
But just making sure that we're using high-grade commercial fencing, and that there's curbing, I
Yeah.
think will prevent a lot of those accidents.
Just because looking at where you propose to put it, the fence is against a parking spot, you know what I mean? So, like I say, accidents happen, it'd just be something to consider maybe.
Most definitely.
Comments or questions?
Well, maybe we could put, that's the front of the building. Maybe you could put one of the ADA van accessible ones there and put the accessible part of the van over next to the fence, so it actually gives it a whole parking spot leeway. Because the only time anybody's gonna be using that is when if there's a handicapped person there anyway, so it's not like a regular person would use either of those
Sure.
spots. And you'd get a little bit of a buffer, at least on one of the two ends. The other end wouldn't be, but again, I just don't see an issue where that parking lot's ever gonna get, the only thing that would concern me is if somebody just blacked out, lost control and went through it, but we could be thinking about every business around here where that happened.
No, absolutely, yeah. Well, I just think,
No.
it abuts a parking space and
Yep, no, I
little
agree.
kids are sitting up against the fence and
I agree
somebody
with you.
just, grandma picking a kid up or something.
Yep.
Most definitely. Or even making it a point to have employees park there.
I don't know.
Well, those fences also, the difference between what her current situation and what this new situation would be is now they're driving straight into it, so, literally, if they lost control or if they put their foot on the gas instead of the brake by accident, which people sometimes do, you'd go through, okay? But on this particular case, they'd all be parallel spots to the fencing, so you're less apt to have that issue. If they get to the end and instead of putting their foot on the brake, they put it on the gas, they're gonna destroy the building before.
Yeah,
they
they're just going through a
destroy
front
it.
door, not the
Well,
playground.
It's better than having kids run over, you know what I mean?
I also have one
I
more.
appreciate all that, but first we'll forgive you for saying that grandma was
I-
going to be the bad driver. We'll forgive you over here for saying that non-handicapped people are regular people, because they're all regular people. All right, now let's take up
Alright.
the conversation.
It was-
And I'm not all that politically correct, but I'm going to get you
Right,
on
my
both of those,
apologies.
but-
Seriously.
I'm sorry.
I was just curious about the layout on the fence. You say that it's going to be up against where they enter the building, so they have to go into this area to access the building?
Ideally.
So there'll be a gate to go into the play area and then into the building?
Yep.
Okay.
But then you also have the other entrance, that's the next one down, that's outside of the gate.
Yeah, not through
Is
our
what
main.
her main entrance is gonna be outside of that gate. Her main entrance is gonna be the next doorway down. It's the two,
Yeah.
it's the
I
first
see.
two units
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
But there will be a separate entrance to the facility, two actually, if I'm not mistaken, on that side that will go into the.
Kind of right in front of the space,
play
straight
area.
in.
Yep.
Understood, okay.
Yep.
I'm
That's fine, it's
reminded
just-
by the staff memo that our order of business would be first to start out with accepting the application as being complete. Does anyone have any questions which require some response to be able to make that decision? If not, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept this application as complete and enable us to make a consideration.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? There are 6 of us tonight, 600, to find the application complete. The applicant has made a request that we waive full site plan review to take this up. Is there any discussion on the request for waiver of full site plan review?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board waive the criteria used for site plan under RSA 674:44 at strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation.
Is there a second for
Yes,
that
I'll
very
second it,
well
Mr. Chairman.
articulated motion? Second by Mr. Milnes, Vice Chair Milnes. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That is 600. Is there any public comment? Nope, there's no public comment, so we'll deal with that. Okay, so as a part of our discussion of waiving full site plan review, we're compelled to address this question of parking and parking spaces and all of that. And I went through a little bit of that calculation a minute ago that would say that after all of the various changes, including the establishment of 4 ADA spaces, they would have approximately 72 spaces on the site. The board should take up the question whether that is an appropriate number for this use. And perhaps in the spirit of making sure the applicant isn't stuck coming back to us, you could actually determine that 70 is the appropriate number, and then 72 gets them over the bar with a little clearance. And we don't have to worry about, oh, well, what if something happens with something we didn't expect? What's the will of the board on that question?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept that they have adequate parking for the site overall. It just requires that the delineation of the suitable 4 ADA spaces have to be clearly marked on the site.
Seconded.
Okay, let me offer some consideration. You need, in order for the staff to be able to implement the site plan, they need a number. And so your total
I think he said
spaces.
70.
I thought I heard 70 as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
It's
that's
pretty
okay.
much, 70 was the number. Excellent. Any discussion on that?
The other issue is that we confirm that the condo association is okay with the spaces
I think
per
that,
condo docs.
would the two of you accept that as a part of your motion?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
I
so
was
the,
thinking that might be a separate item, that they have to get their condo association documents put in order.
Yep.
I think that should be a separate item, Mr. Chairman.
or it may be a condition of
Yeah.
approval that's
Yes,
drafted
there's a
into the memo
condition of
already.
approval.
So as a condition, right now, we have number 4, which is shall provide any draft documents of legal for review.
Well, then,
So as part of that, if the condo docs do not need to be changed, she could just provide us something in writing or whatever
Okay.
saying that they are acceptable and everybody's signed off on them
All
and
right.
whatnot.
Okay, so the motion in the second is a determination by the board that 70 spaces with 4 of them designated as ADA spaces is sufficient for the uses outlined and approved by the board. Any discussion on that item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to determine that. All that's left for the board is to take up any other final considerations of the plan or the potential final disposition of it, noting that the dumpster and the pavement underneath it, is that already a condition of approval, Robert, or does that need to be edited today?
I think it's in,
I thought it was too, but I don't remember.
Don't recall that I specifically said it as a condition, but I know I
It's in
mentioned
his
it,
memo,
so.
but
Yeah,
think it
I
should
didn't
be
put
in
it as
the
a condition, so the
specific
board would have to add that.
All right, so if it's the will of the board to make a final motion, then I offer the suggestion that the maker include that.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant conditional final approval as outlined in the memo dated September 25th, 2019 from Mr. Robert Price, with the specific additional item that they have to relocate the dumpster as Robert's memo specifies, so that it is on a solid ground and therefore can be emptied safely.
On
Seconded.
pavement. Motion and a second for conditional final approval, subject to conditions in the memo, plus a requirement that the dumpster be on a paved area. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600. You're all set. You got some homework
I-
to do with the staff to lay out your parking and cover all this homework, but
Could I ask one quick question?
Of course you can.
Are we under agreement that only one of the spots for ADA
Correct.
approval has
Has to
to
have
have the van accessibility?
I think that's the correct standard under the
Okay.
ADA. Robert, is that right?
Okay.
I believe, I'd have to check the compliance document. I've got that, I can get it for you, but it'll tell you exactly what you have to have.
So I think as far as the understanding for the board or record of minutes, you need to meet whatever the minimum requirement of the ADA is. And if
Okay.
that's 1, then that's plenty. If it says 2, then
Okay,
your number's 2, whatever the requirement, minimum requirement is.
sounds good.
Perfect.
Excellent. Any other questions for us tonight? Hey, thanks
No,
for
thanks so
coming in.
Go
Thank you
forth.
so much.
Glad to see your
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
childcare doing well.
I like it, politically correct. Yes,
Regular
childcare.
kids.
Can't help but calling it daycare.
Go to it, Bank of Dak.
All right. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern.
Did you both sign the sheet? Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Good luck with everything. I think the only item on my mind is that you have the Municipal Association's conference coming up still, and I hope that some folks have had a chance to arrange to go. I can't, but I wish you could.
I'm registered
You
for
can.
Saturday. Yeah.
Awesome.
There's some good seminars there that are worthwhile sitting in on.
Man, the agenda that they sent out was 18 pages long. I mean, there's just 100 different sections in there.
Yeah.
There was a lot.
Well, it covers a lot of different aspects of the town. It's not just planning, but there's something there for everybody.
Yeah, I saw one of the very last ones was groundwater in Merrimack and a study of our water issues, and I thought that'd be a good presentation if anybody's not already tuned into that.
What's the date again of that?
November 8th,
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard you. I was thinking of the,
am I right?
the conference this weekend.
I thought it was the one this.
It is November 13th and 14th is the annual NHMA conference. Neil was thinking of the law lecture conference that they're doing on a Saturday as
Yeah.
well. That's also coming up. But registration for that is now full.
Did you get the memo that had the dates?
I get a lot of memos.
It's on my
I'll send
phone,
it.
actually.
I've got it.
Have you got it? 'Cause I said it'll be on my
Yeah.
phone.
Does
I'll
anyone
send it
else
to
have
you.
any discussion items? Seeing none, then we will move on our agenda to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes of September 17th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, move the Merrimack Planning Board approve minutes Tuesday, September 17th, 2019 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
Second by Paul. Any
I'll just
discussion?
send it to you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to approve the minutes. That concludes our business on our agenda. Item number 6 is adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We are adjourned. Thank
Don't
you
leave
all
me
very
out.
much for the work, and please don't forget to turn your microphones off.